What does it take for a military vehicle to survive in a country where machines break down faster than conditions allow? Land Rover Perentie is not just a military version of a classic Land Rover. It is a vehicle born from one of the toughest military procurement programs of the late 20th century, in a place where climate, distance, and terrain destroy equipment faster than combat ever could. Its story is a clear example of how a civilian platform was radically reshaped to meet real-world conditions, not theoretical requirements. In the early 1980s, the Australian Army faced a serious challenge. Its fleet of light tactical vehicles was outdated. What it needed was a machine capable of surviving the brutal conditions of some of the harshest deserts on the planet, able to patrol hundreds of kilometers without support, and remain operational after decades of service. The response to these requirements became a program launched under the working title Project Perentie. The name was not chosen at random. The Perentie is Australia's largest monitor lizard, known for its endurance and ability to survive in some of the harshest conditions on the continent. Those exact qualities were meant to define the new vehicle. As part of the project, a brutally demanding tender was announced. Candidate vehicles were tested in extreme heat, on sand and rocky tracks, in humid tropical environments, and in cold mountainous regions. The trials did not last weeks but years. Vehicles were sent back to the test grounds again and again, until the true limits of their endurance were finally exposed. Several serious contenders made it to the final stage, including Jeep and Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon. But it was the Land Rover proposal, developed specifically for Australian conditions, that proved to be the best match for the Army's requirements. In 1987, the winner of the tender was officially selected, the vehicle that would go on to carry the same name as the program itself, Land Rover Perentie. At its core, the Perentie was based on the Land Rover 110 platform, but that is where the similarity to civilian Defenders effectively ended. The vehicle was heavily reworked for military use, with a clear focus on long-term service, far from any support infrastructure. The key decision was the choice of engine. Instead of petrol engines or standard British diesels, the Army insisted on a 3.9-liter naturally aspirated Isuzu 4BD1 industrial diesel. It was a fully mechanical engine, with no electronics, sensors, or complex injection systems, a deliberate choice for operation in extreme heat, dust, and with minimal dependence on fuel quality. This engine was not impressive on paper, but it delivered what mattered far more than numbers: strong low-end torque, stable operation in extreme conditions, and the ability to run for years without major overhaul. It was this engine that became the foundation for the most important decision in the entire Perentie story. During testing, one thing became clear. Even the most heavily reinforced 4x4 could not fully meet the real demands of the Australian Army. Distances were too vast, loads too heavy, and operational autonomy was critical. The Army needed a vehicle capable of carrying up to 2 tons of equipment, towing trailers and artillery systems, and remaining mobile where ordinary vehicles simply stopped. That was the moment when Land Rover Australia engineers took a radical step and created the Perentie in a 6x6 configuration. The Perentie 6x6 was not a stretched version of the standard vehicle. It was a separate engineering solution designed specifically for Australian conditions. The extended chassis, third-driven axle, and load-sharing system allowed the vehicle to move confidently across sand, rock, and difficult terrain while fully loaded. The hot-dip galvanized frame made the Perentie highly resistant to corrosion, and when combined with the Isuzu diesel, it created a platform built not for years but for decades of service. The Isuzu engine was paired with a reinforced manual transmission and permanent all-wheel drive across all 3 axles. This configuration allowed the Perentie 6x6 to keep moving even when other vehicles lost traction. Strategic mobility was another key requirement. The Perentie 6x6 was one of the few vehicles in its class that met the criteria for transport by a C-130 Hercules without major disassembly. The Land Rover Perentie 6x6 remained in service for over 2 decades, operating both in Australia and abroad in regions with difficult terrain and limited logistics. Comfort was never a priority. Early versions lacked power steering, air conditioning, and sound insulation, placing emphasis on simplicity and reliability. Long-range patrol vehicle variants based on the 6x6 platform were capable of operating autonomously for extended periods, carrying large supplies of fuel, water, and equipment. In these conditions, the Perentie ultimately proved its core advantage, the ability to keep working where others stopped. But even the most durable vehicle cannot serve forever. In the early 2010s, the Perentie 6x6 began to be gradually withdrawn from service. The reason was not a lack of reliability, but a shift in the nature of modern warfare. The growing threat of mines and improvised explosive devices meant that unarmored vehicles could no longer provide adequate crew protection. Perentie no longer matched a battlefield where protection had become more important than autonomy and mechanical simplicity. After being decommissioned, a significant number of Perentie 6x6 vehicles found their way into civilian ownership. Some were restored and upgraded by specialized workshops, preserving the original engineering while adapting the vehicles to new roles. Former military Perenties were reborn as expedition and rescue vehicles, while well-preserved examples became highly sought after by collectors, with prices reaching six-figure sums. The Land Rover Perentie 6x6 never tried to be comfortable or versatile. It was built as a tool for distance, heat, and environments where mistakes are not forgiven. No electronics, no comfort, no compromises. This is a story about engineering that answers to real-world conditions, not marketing. And that is why the Perentie 6x6 remains in history, not as just another military vehicle, but as an example of machinery built the right way, from the very beginning. If stories like this matter to you, you know where to find us.